Shalom, shalom everyone. This is Brother Jimmy, aka Ambassadors of Yah. On this study, I am going to show you through scripture when a day begins. There are many that say that a day begins in the evening. There are those that say that a day begins at midnight. Well, let's see what the scripture says. So I'm going to be reading out of the scriptures. TS 2009 is another name for it. We're going to start in Genesis. So let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Now I want you to notice something. And let me bring this down so you can see it a little clearer. I want you to really pay attention to the words that I'm sharing with you. Okay, so here it is, Genesis chapter 1. And we're going to start here at verse 3. And it says, "And Elohim said, let light come to be, and light came to be. And Elohim saw that the light, and that it was great. And Elohim separated the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning one day." Now, I had shared this before, and I'm going to share this again. Notice, even if you read it from the King James Version, in the King James Version, it says it a little different, but I'm going to show you what it says there as well. Now, as we look at the King James Version, notice here as well it reads in verse 5, "And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day." Now, notice that it says, "And the evening and the morning were the first day." Now, the King James Version has given us this type of translation, but again, in the Scriptures edition, we see this, verse 5, "And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there came to be evening, and there came to be morning one day." Now, if I say to you, "came to be," that is a prepositional phrase. The prepositional phrase here, "came to be," is letting you know that a process of time has transpired. Okay, so if I say to you that you came to be an adult, that means that you were not an adult when you was born. It was through a process of time that you came to be an adult. And so this is why it's very important what translation that you have, because here we see that it came to be evening and it came to be morning. Okay, so what is that telling us? That the work that Yahuwah did was the daylight. That was the daytime. He was that light. And so just like you, when you work, you go to work in the day, unless you have a different shift, like a swing shift or a graveyard shift. But we're speaking of how it was back in the day. There was no electricity, and everyone worked when the sun came up. Okay, so here we see that even in day 2, where it says that this was the work that Yah had did. He separated the waters from the waters. That was his job. That was his work for the day. So after he was done with his work, it says, "And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning the second day." Same thing about the third day. What was his job? What was his work on the third day? He brought up the land out of the water. Okay, and then he also planted trees. Now, after all this was done, he says here, "And it came to be evening, and it came to be morning the third day." Same thing with the fourth day, and so on and so forth. We see it came to be, came to be, came to be, came to be, right? So you see that it says at the end, which both of them agree, the King James and the Scriptures, is that the end was the morning. Because notice it says it came to be evening, and there came to be morning the fourth day. All right, so now let's look at this again in the King James Version. And notice in the King James Version, every time, day 1, day 2, day 3, and let's look at day 2, it says, "And the evening and the morning were the second day." Now, if it says that the morning here, it doesn't say evening to evening, but that's what we've been taught. We've been taught by the Orthodox Jews, the Jewish people over there in Israel, that a day begins in the evening. If it begins in the evening, why do we say, just look at the words here. It says it ended in the morning, and the morning were the second day. So if the morning constitutes the end of the second day, where are we getting the evening from? Where's the rest of the day? Now let me show you what I'm speaking of. So let me take this off the cradle. Let me show you a diagram. And on this diagram, you'll see here, notice how we have the dawn here. Okay, this is daylight. The sun rises, you do your job, you work. As the day comes to a close, you get ready to go home. It's now dusk. Okay, now when dusk comes about, you get home, it is evening time. Evening comes from the word Arab in Hebrew. That is the same word that we use for Arab, a person who is an Arab, an Arabic person. What does Arab mean in Hebrew? It means half light and half dark. This is where we get the word evening. Even the word evening, if you take off the ing, you have even light, even dark. Okay, that's this line. That's what it represents, and we call it dusk. Same thing on the opposite side when the sun is getting ready to come up. We call it dawn. Okay, this is that separation between light and darkness, but it's also an Arab. We don't call it Arab, but it is Arab in the sense that it's half light and half dark. Okay, so this happened 6 times through the creation week. And then on the 7th day, of course, we know that he rested from all his work because, again, work is to be done during the day. You don't work at night, okay? Even though in our modern time we do. So all that being said, if you notice, just like I was saying earlier, day 1, he said, let there be light. He became that light, all right? Now here comes, it goes time to go to bed, goes to sleep at night. Remember, he called the darkness night. And then the sun rises. And then it goes on to the next day. As soon as that sun cracks the horizon, that begins the next day. That is sunrise. Kind of like this picture that we see here. You see this picture of the sun as it's coming over the horizon? This is considered the first day. Not when you just see a little bit of the sun. No. Half of the sun, when it's coming up, is considered the beginning of the day. You'll see even pictographs of a sun. This is what it represents. Okay, you have a line, and then you would have the circle, a semicircle over the line. That is the beginning of the day. So now this happens for 6 days. Yah worked during the day, rested during the day, or through the night. Not that he sleeps, but again, this is to show us an example, a foreshadow of how we are to conduct our days. All right, so now, again, we see that it says daytime, or morning, excuse me. Now the morning, as we see here over and over again, why don't we ever question that the morning is the ending of the first day? So after the morning, you have what? The daylight. The sun rises and you're going through the rest of your day. But it doesn't talk about that here. That's missing, right? No, it's not. It just doesn't talk about it other than that there was work that was done during the day. And then it becomes evening, and then it becomes morning. And so hence why the scriptures makes it a lot more clearer and more definite to where you can see that a work was done, and then it came to be evening, and then it came to be morning. Same thing all throughout the days. Okay, so that's one thing that the King James Version and the scriptures agree on, is that the day ends in the morning. So what are we being told? Even through the King James Version, where it says morning, okay, and the same thing here in the scriptures, morning, that's when the day ends and another one begins. Here's the word morning, which we would call dawn. And when that sun comes up, just like I showed you earlier in this little diagram here, this picture of the pictograph of what we would see in ancient pictographs of another day, it would be that semicircle with a line across it, which lets you know that a new day begins. And this is the same thing here. Sunrise is the beginning of a new day. This is common sense. It doesn't start in the evening, as we've been told. We're not to be looking for no sliver of the moon for the beginning of the month, which is a whole nother study. But to stay on topic, again, they want us to believe that light has become dark and dark has become light. Like the scripture says, they would tell us that righteousness is now evil, evil is now righteousness. And so we see here that this is when the day begins. The day begins every morning at sunrise. At sunrise. Now let me show you another one. Okay, so now we're here in Exodus, also known as Shemot in Hebrew. Shemot, aka Exodus. We're in chapter 16. This is the only place, family, where you will find where Yah teaches the children of Yasharal, aka Israel, how to keep the Sabbath. And not only that, but it also shows for the reader, for those of us who are rightly dividing the word of truth, when a day begins. So now let me show you this. So let's continue. Chapter 16, verse 1. And it says, and they set out from Alim, and all the congregation of the children of Yasharal came to the wilderness of Zin, which is between Alim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they're going out of the land of Mitzrayim. Yours would say Egypt. Okay. Now, just as a side note, the reason why I have the word moon crossed out, as you can see that it's italicized, means that they added the word and that it wasn't part of the original manuscript. Okay. And so I wanted to show you that before I continue on, that this should actually say either a period or month instead of the word moon. And so that's why that is scratched out. Verse 2. And all the congregation of the children of Yasharal grumbled against Moshe, aka Moses, and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Yasharal said to them, if only we had died at the hand of Yahuwah in the land of Mitzrayim, in Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and when we ate bread to satisfaction. For you, meaning Moses, have brought us out into this wilderness to put all this assembly to death with hunger. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, see, I am raining bread from the heavens, from the Shamayim for you, and all the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, in order to try them, whether they walk in my Torah, which is my instruction, my law, or not. Now notice what it says here in verse 4 at the beginning. See, I am raining bread. Remember that. I am raining bread from the heavens, from the Shamayim for you. Okay. And then he says what? That they are to gather a day's portion every day. And this is how he was going to try them. This is how he was going to test them, whether they would walk, action verb, in my Torah, my law, my instructions or not. And he says, and it shall be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in. And it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. All right. So now let's continue. And goes on and says, and Moses and Aaron said to all the children of Yasharal at evening. Notice the word at evening. You shall know that Yahuwah has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt. And in the morning, there's that word, you shall see the esteem of Yahuwah. Now notice the words evening and morning. Same thing that we read in Genesis. Okay. The same thing that we saw in Genesis chapter 1, 6 times. Evening and morning, right? So let's continue. For he, meaning Yahuwah, hears your grumblings against him, or against Yahuwah. And what are we? What are we? This is what Moses and Aaron is saying, right? That you grumble against us. And Moshe said, in that Yahuwah gives you meat to eat in the evening. Notice that I have that underlined, meat to eat in the evening. And in the morning, bread to satisfaction. Remember, he said earlier that he was going to do what? And I told you to remember. He said that he was going to rain down bread from the heavens. See, I am raining bread from the heavens for you. Why? In order to try them, in order to test them. So here it is. We see in verse 7, and in the morning you shall see the esteem of Yahuwah, for he hears your grumbling against Yahuwah. Actually, I wanted to read verse 8. And Moshe said, in that Yahuwah gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning bread to satisfaction. This is the part that I wanted you to see. In the morning, bread to satisfaction. Remember, he said he was going to rain down bread every day. Okay. But this what he says about they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much that they gather daily. This was on the 6th day. Okay. Because we know on the 7th day, he is not going to rain down this bread. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit to verse 12. And it says here, I have heard the grumblings of the children of Yasharal. Speak to them, saying, now this should say at evening, okay, or at the evening. Here in the scriptures, they have it wrong. They put the word between the evenings. They had the S there, hence why I scratched that out and crossed out between, because in the King James, it actually has at evening, which is correct. All right. So just so you can see, let me show you. Okay, so here in the King James Version, verse 12, same thing. It says, I have heard the murmurings of the children of Yasharal. Speak unto them, saying, at evening. Okay, or they say even, you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, or a mighty one. So back here in the scriptures we see, and I'm going to read this again. I have heard the grumblings of the children of Yasharal. Speak to them, saying, at the evening you are to eat meat, and in the morning you are to be satisfied with bread. You shall know that I am Yahuwah, your mighty one, your Elohim. Now, verse 13 tells us exactly what's going to happen in the evening and what's going to happen in the morning. And it reads, and it came to be that quails is a type of bird. Quail is a lot like pigeons. It's a lot like chicken or turkey. Okay, it's a clean animal. Came up at evening. So quails came up at evening and covered the camp. And in the morning, the dew lay all around the camp. Now this dew-like substance, it says here, it was all over the surface of the wilderness, a small round-like substance as fine as frost on the ground. All right. Now, as we continue to read, it says, and the children of Yasharal saw, and they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Masha said to them, it is the bread which Yahuwah has given you to eat. So now this is the bread, this round-like substance that fell all over the wilderness, on the surface of the wilderness. And they were going to get this in the morning, not in the evening, because they got quails, meat to eat in the evening. All right. And so now when we continue to read, it says that they were to bring according to the number of their beings. And it says that the children did as they were told. Okay. And then it says here, verse 19, and Moses said, let no one leave any of it until morning. And they did not listen to Moses. So some of them left a part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Masha was angry or wroth with them. Now notice what verse 21 says. And they gathered it every morning. What did they gather every morning? What was it? It was this round-like substance. Now we're going to call it what they called it, manna. And the house of Yasharal called its name manna. Okay. And so here we notice that they gathered it every morning, and each one according to his need. And when the sun became hot, it melted. So that lets you know that they couldn't allow this stuff to just lay there on the ground without picking it up before the sun got to it, because if the sun got to it, it would melt. And it says in verse 22, and it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Masha. And he said to them, this is what Yahuwah has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Shabbat set apart to Yahuwah. So now, how was the sign given to them that the next day would be Shabbat? That Yahuwah rained down twice as much as he did all the other days. So this is why it says, and it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread. Okay. So that was, in a sense, a sign for them that the next following day would be the Sabbath. So let's continue. And so here it says, that which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook, and lay it up for yourselves, all that is left over, to keep it until morning. So this one was different. It wasn't like all the other days. All the other days, the other 6 days, if they kept it till the next morning, it would breed worms and it would stink because it was decomposing. So notice here it says, and they laid it up till morning as Masha commanded, and it did not stink, and no worms was in it. And so Masha said to them, eat it today. So this is the next day. Eat it today, for today is a Shabbat to Yahuwah. Today you do not find it in the field. Now let's think about that for a second. If Yah says that they were to gather this 6 days, and on the seventh day there would be none, right? Then when did they pick this stuff up? Again, we're told in verse 21, they gathered it every morning. This should be a hint to you, along with the book of Genesis as a witness. The book of Genesis, we saw that the day ended every morning. No matter what translation you read, it's going to say morning, and then it'll say the day or the number of the date. Okay, so that lets you know, regardless of the translation that you're reading, that it ends in the morning. The day ends in the morning. The following day ends, and now the following day starts to begin because now the sun is rising. So here it is that we see the same thing, that we're being told the same thing. Okay, because they gathered it for 6 days, but on the seventh day, which is the Shabbat, there is none. You'll find none of it in the field. Okay, that's what it says here. Today, you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the seventh day, which is a Shabbat, there is none. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather, but they found none. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, how long shall you refuse to guard my commands? Or how long shall you refuse to keep my commandments and my Torah, which in Hebrew is plural. The T here instead of Torah is Torah. Torah means laws or instructions, plural. So he says, see, because Yahuwah has given you the Shabbat, therefore he has given you bread for 2 days. On the sixth day, let each one stay in his place. Do not let anyone go out of his place on the seventh day. Now, when people read that part, they think that Yah is saying that you can't leave your home on Shabbat. That's not what he's saying. He was telling them specifically, don't come out of your tent because you're not going to find this manna-like substance on the ground. Stay in your tent. That's what he was saying here. Do not let no one leave their tent. Don't go. This says, don't let no one go out of his place on the seventh day. This is what Moshe was instructing them. So the people rested on the seventh day. All right. So what is the moral of this story? Is that here in verse 12, chapter 16 of Exodus, at the evening you are to eat meat. In the morning you are to be satisfied with bread. And then verse 13, remember I showed you here where it says quails came up at evening. So they were, I guess in a sense, because it doesn't tell us that this was every evening, but I'm pretty sure that's probably what happened throughout the 40 years that they were out in the wilderness, that Yah would bring quail up every day or every evening. And then every morning they would get bread of satisfaction. Now, Yah taught them this for 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years. And here it is. We have been brought back into the traditions of men to keep it from evening to evening when there is no such thing anywhere in Scripture that a day begins in the evening. Nowhere. I just showed you in 2 different places when the day ends and when a day begins. Okay? And see here in Exodus chapter 16, we see that the day begins in the morning because, again, they gathered this stuff up, verse 21, every morning. This is how they knew that the next day when they woke up and they found none, that it was the Shabbat. Eat it today, for today is the Sabbath to Yahuwah. Today you do not find it in the field. When would they find it in the field? Every morning. Verse 21. So that is clear as day, no pun intended, that a day begins every sunrise. Every sunrise, the day begins. Again, to show you from my diagram here, look at it again. You go to work. I'm going to use you and I as an example. You wake up, you go to work. You do your job. As soon as the sun is getting ready to set, you're on your way home. You get home. It's dusk. It's evening time. You eat your food. You take a shower. And then comes the night. It's time to go to rest. You rest all throughout the night. And then just before the sun comes up, because you want to take advantage of the daylight to do your work, and most of them was working out in the field as farmers or as shepherds, so they would have to use all this daylight to commence their work. So here it is. They wake up just before the sun is getting ready to crack over the horizon at dawn. Okay? And so then that would complete that day from the day before, when they was working through the day and then going through the night. That's the end of the day, which is why you read, and it came to be morning. The next day, when the sun rises, begins the next day. Now, I'm going to show you the same thing, but this time let's go into the New Testament, aka what we call the book of Matthew. We're going to go there, okay? And we're going to go to chapter 28. Chapter 28 of Matthew, we read this. So this is Matthew, chapter 28, verse 1. But late in the Sabbath isn't over here. It says, but late in the Sabbath, as it was dawning. Remember, as it was dawning. It's not the next day yet, but it's dawning. It's getting there, and it means it's coming. Something is over the or under the horizon, about to come over the horizon. That's what dawning is, or dawn. So as it was dawning into day one of the week. So the first day of the week was just about to come, so it wasn't there yet. That's why it says, as it was dawning into day one of the week, right? So the Sabbath lasts through the whole night. It's not just a day portion, as some would teach. It's also even the evening portion, all the way through the night, all the way to the dawn. Okay? Which is what we're reading here in Matthew chapter 28, verse 1. But late in the Sabbath. You can't mix that up. But then somebody may take you to another translation, like the King James Version, which doesn't read that way. And why is that? Because they're trying to get everyone to understand that a day begins in the evening. And this is how you can see the lying pens of the scribe, where they teach us what they want us to see. And they want the Gospels, which do not truly harmonize, which is a whole nother study in itself, because that lets us know that the way it was translated is not harmonized. But I guarantee you the originals that was written in Hebrew did harmonize with one another, but we don't have those. So we can't speak on those subjects, right? So here it is, Matthew chapter 28. Now notice how it's written in the King James Version. It says here, in the end of the Sabbath. Notice it says, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day. So here, it's saying that the Sabbath has ended, right? But here, the Sabbath hasn't ended yet. It was still late in the Sabbath. It was still Sabbath. Here, the Sabbath has ended already. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week. Now, one can say, well, it kind of sounds like it's almost saying the same thing. Yes, yet, and no. Because again, you see, in the end. If you come to the end of something, like the end of a movie, you're at the end. Okay? You're at the end. So here, late in the Sabbath, lets you know that the day of any portion of the day goes all the way, what we would consider or call 24 hours. All right? So again, sunrise to sunrise is when a day begins. Sunrise to sunrise is when a day begins. Same thing with the Sabbath. The Sabbath does not start in the evening. It starts at sunrise. All right. It does not start in the evening. It starts at sunrise, because even if that was the case, even through the King James Version, this would not make even any sense at all, that as it was coming to the end of the Sabbath, or in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, then we thought that what? Isn't Sabbath supposed to go from evening to evening? But here it is. It's dawning. It's a dawn. This is morning. This is the time when the sun is getting ready to rise up. You see, the problem is that when you have some of these people who want to teach you about when a day begins, they'll take you to a place like this. And now let me show you another argument that they have. And so this is why I'm going to share this with you before someone tries to pull the wool over your eyes. So let's go to Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23, here we find the 7 high days, or the feast days, the Moadims of Yahuwah, okay? But there's one in particular that I want you to see. The one that I want you to see is about the day of Pentecost. So now let me put this back on my cradle so I can use both of my hands and point out what I'm trying to point out to you. Okay, so here we have Yom Teruah, verse 26. Let's start this. Chapter 23 of Leviticus, verse 26. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, on the 10th day of this 7th new month is Yom HaKippurim, which is the Day of Atonement. It shall be a set-apart gathering for you, and you shall afflict your beings, and shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. And you do no work on that same day, for it is Yom Kippurim, to make atonement for you before Yahuwah your Elohim, your mighty one. For any being who is not afflicted on that same day, he or she shall be cut off from their people. And any being who does any work on that same day, that being I shall destroy from the midst of their people. You do no work, a law forever, throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Now this is where they try to get people. Let's look at verse 32. Let's look at this carefully. It is a Sabbath of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings. On the 9th day of the new month at evening, notice the word at evening, from evening to evening you observe your Sabbath. Now, let's go back for a second. Could have sworn it said that it was on the 10th day, right? And it is. On the 10th day of the 7th new month is Yom HaKippurim. However, here in verse 32, we're told, on the 9th day of the new month at evening, from evening to evening, you observe your Shabbat. You observe your rest. So here it says from evening to evening, it's speaking of this particular day, which is called the Day of Atonement. Hence why you started the day before at evening, which is the 9th day, and it goes on into the 10th day. All right. Now, how does this make sense? Let me show you this on our calendar. Okay. So now let me show you on the calendar. This is the 7th month. As you can see here, Kadash 7. Let me get that to focus in. Kadash 7. But now, as you see Kadash 7, the 7th month, I want you to look at, this is number 9, and this is day 10. You can kind of see it. It's a little faded, but it's only that reason because there's writing there. But you can see the 8th day, and you can see the 11th day, which is a Shabbat. Okay? So, each day, let me just use this one here, since this block doesn't have what we see here, and I'm going to explain to you, and that's why we're going there in a second. Each day, and again, let's just use an approximate 24-hour period, as we call a day, right? 24-hour period. So the beginning of this line would be morning, or when the sun rises to begin the day. This would be another morning, starting another day, okay? Now, this one here, the reason why you see a square within a square, and it's straddling 2 days, is exactly what we just read here in Leviticus chapter 23, starting at verse 27, about the 10th day of the 7th new month. And then in verse 32, we were told that on the 9th day of the new month at evening, from evening to evening, you are to observe your Shabbat. So that's what you're seeing here. This line represents the evening. This line represents the evening. This piece here represents the day portion of the day, the light portion. This part here, this rectangle, represents the night portion. This portion would be the day portion. This portion would be the night portion. All right. So evening, this line, remember this is morning to evening. So evening to evening, this square is to be your Shabbat. Okay, your rest from evening to evening. Hence why it's only for this particular day. It is not for every Sabbath or for every day of the week. All right. Why do we know this? Again, I just showed you in 3 different places. Genesis chapter 1, about when a day begins. It came to be evening. It came to be morning. Same thing in Exodus chapter 16, that he was going to use manna, that it would rain down every morning. They would gather it every morning. And then I showed you in Matthew chapter 28, verse 1, that it was late in the Shabbat as it was dawning to the first day of the week. Once again, that's 3 witnesses from 3 different locations of the scriptures okay, to show you, to let you know when a day begins. The reason why these begin in the evening, and what I mean by these, I'm talking about the Day of Atonement, also the day of Passover, and the day of, what do we call the matzah, or the bread of unleavened bread, rather. Those start in the evening, okay? So here on the 14th day, remember, it's supposed to start at evening, okay? You start the Passover at evening, all right? Now, for the next 7 days, you are to eat unleavened bread, and you do this for 7 evenings. You eat unleavened bread. Those 3 things, the Passover, the days of unleavened bread, and the Day of Atonement, all start in the evening, because they have one thing in common, and it's our sin, our transgression, those things that we have done before Yah, our iniquities. That's what it's speaking about. Those are the reasons why those 3 begin in the evening. It has to do with our sin nature. The other 4 high days all begin in the day. Hence why we don't need to be told extra information of how you are to do those feast days, just like here about the Passover. Notice here it talks about the Passover. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah, set apart gatherings, which you are to proclaim at their appointed times. In the first new month of the 14th day of the new month at the evening is the Passover to Yahuwah. Okay, same thing with the unleavened bread. Let's go to Exodus chapter 12. I believe that's where it is. Let me make sure, because I might have forgot, but I believe that's where it is. And yes, it is. So here it says 7 days. This is Exodus chapter 12, by the way. Exodus chapter 12, starting at verse 15. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you shall cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being shall be cut off from Yasharal. And on the first day is a set apart gathering, and on the 7th day you have a set apart gathering. No work at all is done on them. Only that which is eaten by every being, that alone is prepared by you. And you shall guard or keep the festival of Matzah. For on the same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, and you shall guard this day throughout all your generations, an everlasting law. Okay, so notice it says, in the first month, on the 14th day of the new month, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the new month in the evening. Okay, so again, those 3 feasts are to be done in the evening, or they start in the evening. And with that, my friends, I hope you learned something from all of this. My name is Brother Jimmy, aka Ambassadors of Yah. I hope it made sense. If you have any issues or any questions about what I just shared with you, please email me at ambassadorsofyah@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. With that being said, shalom, shalom. Till next time.